Importing files into Octane Render. In order to get the best success out of Octane Render, a proper object export must be done in your modeling software. To get that, we have to make sure that we have a couple things that are pretty common. One, you may have to make sure that you apply all modifiers. So if your software has any type of modifiers that are affecting geometry, making instanced copies, whatever, those should be applied so that all of the geometry gets exported properly. Another concept is that you should have all of your objects in a single scene, or all of your meshes, and that whole scene is going to be exported as a single object file. Currently, you can't take, let's say, an object that's a car and load that into Octane Render and then have a gas pump that's a separate object and then load that into Octane at the same time and have them exist in the same scene. You have to have all of your objects in one scene in your modeling software before you export them. Also, when you export them, it's crucial that the scale is proper. Octane is expecting 1 unit to equal 1 meter. So if the units are set improperly in the modeling software, such as the model was made where the 1 unit is equal to centimeters, or 1 unit is set to equal kilometers, then those will introduce errors when you import those scenes into Octane. Those errors could manifest as difficulties in navigation, where you're trying to move about the scene and it's acting erratically. It could also be where there's a large amounts of like circle lines that are all over the mesh, and those are errors that are introduced due to the scale being wrong. So to help us to have more control over the importing of objects into Octane, if you go to File, we have an Object Mesh Import Preferences dialog. As we can see, this dialog has many settings. We can override the settings during individual mesh import. If you click this box, then every single time you import a mesh, this box will open up so that you can make adjustments every time. Otherwise, we can make some global settings and then they will stand for the rest of the imports that we do. The scale that I just mentioned, if you did not, or you do not have any further control over how the mesh was exported as an object, we can overcome some of that difficulty by saying, well, the object file units were in, millimeters, and then Octane will understand the scale of that object properly. Also, there are sometimes difficulties with the smoothing values of an object as they were exported, and those can be controlled here, so that if your object was exported with smooth groups, you would want to interpolate using smooth groups. If you have some high quality object vertex normals, you'd want to use those if they're supplied. Okay, the second thing as far as importing, the biggest problem that people have is they want to say file and open. They want to open a wavefront object file and get it working with inside Octane. The open command on the file menu is only for Octane scene files, and those are files ending in OCS, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. In order to get an object file into Octane, you're going to go down over the graph editor, we're going to right click and click Add. Then we're going to click Objects and we're going to click Mesh. Now you can go into the demo suite that we downloaded, and let me just pick like the spaceship scene, and you can click on spaceships.obj and hit open, and it will bring in and import in your objects. This will then show up as a node, and when you click on the node, it will begin rendering, and the scene will show up. And now we have the objects inside Octane Render. Now, in the commercial version, if you click File, you can save this scene as an Octane scene, so you can continue to work on it and tweak it and animate it or whatever in the future. That's been disabled for the demo version. So another way that if we wanted to open a scene, we can click Open, and there are, in the same demo suites, we'll choose the same scene, Spaceships, there's a spaceship scene. As you can see, it's the same scene, but the floor is a different color and the camera angle is slightly different. So once we have Octane scene files, we can use the File menu to save as, to open, and if we wanted to create a new file to start working fresh, we'd hit New. If we want to import in objects that we've exported from our modeling software, again, we would start with a fresh new file. We would right-click and say Add Objects Mesh, and that is how you add an exported object file into Octane Render.